Hello, and welcome to Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. It's cult day today, so strap in for another wacky and disturbing tale. It's 1992. The people of Austin, Texas are enjoying a day in the park near Barton Springs, and they notice that something strange is happening. There is a mass of barely clothed people, all very attractive, in shape, holding hands and sitting on the cliffs above the little spring. Their legs are dangling in the air and they're swinging their feet in unison. And all of their eyes are fixed on one man clad only in a banana hammock and a fake tan. He's got a steely gaze accentuated with black eyeliner. He is Teacher. He raises his hand and the entire group collectively launches off the rocks above and lands in the cool waters below. Today we are talking about, hands down, one of the most ridiculous cults I have ever heard of, and one of the most dangerous. This is the Buddhafield cult. I'm your host, Stacy Lee. Let's begin. We're going to go back in time a little bit to 1982. Venezuelan-born Haime Gomez is living in Hollywood. It is his dream to become an actor. In his mind, he just needs the right break to become the next Michael Douglas or Harrison Ford. He can feel it in his bones. He is going to be famous. For years, he struggles in Hollywood. Why can't these casting directors and agents see just how special he is? Why is he not getting hired? It couldn't be because of his looks. He knew that because he was the best looking man to ever live. It couldn't be because of his acting skills because they were superb, according to him. So why wasn't Haime getting hired? Haime was born to a wealthy rancher. He lived a life of privilege and he became a ballet dancer before he decided to move to California to become a star. As Haime spent time in the downtown Hollywood area, he began to realize that that place was and is a magnet for lost souls, for people with shattered dreams, with damaged self-esteem, and with little money. Perfect hunting grounds for a predator like Haime Gomez. Haime begins talking to some of these lost souls, and he was surprised and excited about the reaction that he got. They thought he had something to say. They listened to him. They paid attention to him. The first thing Haime does, this is Cult 101, is change his name to Michelle. He starts to go by Michelle. And when he did, he started to get a couple of jobs. Here is a screenshot of him as an extra in Rosemary's Baby, but that was about it for him. He tries porn. He even fails at that. I mean, how bad do you have to be to fail at porn? He moves to Florida for a while and he teaches acting classes. That doesn't take, so he moves back to LA. Remember a few weeks ago when we talked about the Rod of Iron Ministries, and then before that, the Cult of Falun Gong, and then before that, the Knights of the Crystal Blade, and before that, and before that, and before that? What's the first thing that happens in these stories? A man is disappointed in his life. He feels he is much more special than others recognize him to be, and so, with his life floundering and not turning out the way he wants it to, he reinvents himself and he goes after a little group of followers. And before long, it's a cult. Haime's little group of followers did not have church meetings. They actually spent most of their time together working out. This was the 80s. The fitness craze was sweeping the nation. And then Haime, Michelle, whatever, decided to start offering hypnotherapy sessions to his followers. Does he have a license in hypnotherapy? No, of course not. Does he have training in therapy? Why would he need that? Haime Michelle starts charging his followers $50 for these therapy sessions. And in these sessions, his followers were required to tell him everything about themselves. As Haime Michelle got closer to these men, the therapy got more and more intense. So what comes next? You're part of the Dark Hearts community. You know what comes next. Lots and lots of sex with the followers. Every cult leader is told by whatever deity it is that he follows that he is supposed to have all the sex with all the young people in the cult. This is Cult 101, and it is no different this time around. This particular movement was based honestly, it was based on Haime Michel. I mean, there wasn't a particular deity. He claims that this theory, his way of thinking, has roots in Eastern spiritual traditions, primarily Buddhism. But Haime also incorporated other religious practices as well, while denying that he was religious at all. Before long, Haime is not Haime, Michel is not Michel. I just have to laugh because every single one of these stories is the same. They change their names. They give themselves a pretty princess crown or a robe. It's just comical how much alike they all are, while thinking that they are so different and unique and the one and only. It just makes me laugh. Haime Michel is now calling himself the teacher. I guess there was also a time he called himself Andreas for a while. So he's been Haime Michel Andreas, the teacher. But hold on, that name only lasted for a little while, and soon he changed it again to the Master. Haime Michel Andreas, the teacher, the Master, claimed to have achieved enlightenment, which, if you know anything about enlightenment, that's like a really big claim. The Master was gaining traction. Members were drawn to him because of his promises of spiritual growth and a deeper understanding of life. And let's never ever downplay the importance of community within cults. There are a lot of very lonely, lost people in this world. This is a tough world, and cults offer lonely people community, and community is important. I feel for people who are lost and alone, and that's why I despise these cult leaders so much. They prey upon people who are truly looking for community and companionship, and it is very sinister. It's now 1992, and the Master decides that the entire group is going to relocate from Hollywood to Austin, Texas. The cult buys a piece of property out by Bee Cave, and the Master hires a construction company to build a 300-seat theater. More truthfully, the cult builds the theater and he hires a construction company to kind of oversee it just so it will pass inspections. The cult members were doing most of the actual work, even though a lot of them had no experience in construction. This is the theater that was eventually constructed. So with this new space, the Master goes to work. He decides the cult is going to become a ballet company. This ballet company practiced 5 days a week. Now, this is where I'm going to give a little dance teacher information here. You cannot take adults that are 20, 22, 24, 25 years old and turn them into ballet dancers. They can improve. Sure, they can. They cannot become great ballet dancers. Ballet is something that must be started at a very young age because the muscles are actually trained as they develop. So this guy, he knows this, but he wants to have his own dance company so badly, he's willing to settle for mediocrity, I guess. Whoa, my hair's getting a little crazy. Haime Michel Andreas, the teacher, the Master, spends all of this money to have this theater company come in and design a sound system, a lighting system. He hires a costume designer. He hires makeup artists because in his mind, if he couldn't be the star of a ballet company, well, he was just going to start his own company. One follower would later say that these guys worked on this ballet for 2 years. There was one ballet and they worked on it for 2 years. The set was 25 feet tall. The costumes were made, custom costumes. The lights were purchased. The theater was built and ready to go. And then the ballet company had a dress rehearsal. The second day was supposed to be a second dress rehearsal. The Master canceled the second dress rehearsal and the ballet was never performed. So these people had been working on this show for 2 years and it was never actually put on. Jason and I, when we lived in Austin, we used to drive by this cult compound and we would always hear these rumors about what used to go on there. The documentary that eventually comes out was just getting I think, finished when we lived in Austin. But there were always these rumors, surrounding this place. And you'd hear different things from time to time. The building itself was built back in 1997, and it was long abandoned by the time Jason and I lived in Austin from 2014 to 2016. We're going to get into kind of what happens to the building. But this theater has a very long history, a very interesting history. And it's just recently been purchased by Joe Rogan, who now lives in Austin, and he plans to turn this theater into a comedy club. I hope he gets the foundation checked and has some engineers look at this thing, because I found documents stating it is literally built out of hay bales covered in homemade stucco. And that might work for a house, but that is not going to pass any sort of commercial code. But Joe Rogan is the smartest person in the world, so I'm sure he'll look into it. The master begins to teach the importance of personal transformation and the rejection of societal norms. Members were encouraged to embrace a lifestyle that was often at odds with mainstream culture, leading to a sense of unity and purpose within the group. It unifies people when you say, look at all those people over there. We talk about othering all the time. It's called othering. Look at those other people over there. When you other people, you bring together the group that you're trying to control. You're able to more easily convince them that you have something special and that they're part of something that the other people don't have. The cult operated under the premise that true enlightenment could only be achieved through dedication to the teachings of the master and adherence to the cult's practices. Sometimes followers were forced to exercise 3 or 4 hours a day. Being in peak physical condition was paramount within the cult, not because it was healthy, but so you could look good. It was all about looking good. The master told his followers that their bodies must be perfect specimens. They were told to eat a clean diet. They were not allowed to drink alcohol or have caffeine, and they had to abstain from drugs. Then when the master started teaching ballet to his followers, these ballet classes would run hours and hours long. And at the end of these exhausting ballet classes, then they would have these long meditative sobbing sessions where everyone was like collectively crying to release their trauma. Just kill me. Just take me out to the pasture with the old cows. I mean, there's not that much difference between me and them anyway. And just let me go quietly into the night. I cannot think of anything that sounds like more of a nightmare than that to me. We all have trauma. We should all work through our trauma. People who become stuck in their trauma and obsessed with their trauma are the most insufferable people on the planet. And the last thing in the world I want to do is sit around and talk about trauma forever. I have a very difficult time with professional victims. People will call me mean or harsh or unforgiving, but professional victimhood for me is insufferable. We all have choices. We all have terrible things that happen to us, and we all have choices. And you can choose to wallow in your trauma like a pig in the mud for the rest of your life, or you can choose to work through it, go to therapy for 6 months, get to a point where you can find some form of happiness and move on. That has to be a choice. You have to make that choice. You have to make that choice unless you want to spend your life being a professional victim. Anyways, members of the Buddhafield cult engaged in these various spiritual practices, including meditation, chanting, group rituals, all things that I do think have some benefit, but it was just ad nauseum with these guys. The activities were designed to foster a sense of connection among members and facilitate their personal growth. The cult claims to emphasize the importance of living in harmony with one another and with the environment, promoting a lifestyle that aligns with these values. Oh, but wait, there's this one other thing that comes along in the cult: the shit tons of plastic surgery. We know there is nothing that brings a person closer to enlightenment than liposuction and calf implants. I love me some Botox. I will have a facelift at some point. You guys know I am on my way to getting my breast implants out now, but to conflate spirituality and plastic surgery, there could not be two more ridiculous. Oh, okay. And of course, Buddhafield cult has a patriarchal structure with the master at the top. Members were expected to show unwavering loyalty and obedience to him, and dissent was often met with harsh repercussions. This authoritarian structure raised concerns about the psychological manipulation and control exerted over the members. The Buddhafield cult actively sought new members, often targeting individuals who were already exploring alternative spiritual paths or seeking community. Recruitment methods varied from time to time, but they would include things like retreats in the woods, workshops, social gatherings, meetings in hotel ballrooms. It's all very cliche and trite, where potential members could experience the group's teachings firsthand. Now, of course, at these meetings, the cult puts their happy, shiny people face on, and people only see the good and they don't see any of the bad. But once these individuals were joined in the cult and immersed in a tightly knit community that offered them support and camaraderie, they started to get a sense of belonging, and that's how they really got hooked. This cult was particularly successful in drawing in people who felt isolated or disillusioned by mainstream society. The cult provided a refuge where individuals could explore their spiritual beliefs without any kind of judgment. Well, that's what the cult said anyway, but that's not what was happening, because this is about a cult. However, the community aspect of Buddhafield could also lead to an environment of conformity, where dissenting opinions or questions about the teachings were discouraged. This created a dynamic where members often felt pressured to conform to the group's ideals and beliefs, further solidifying their commitment to the cult. It's very insidious. The cult continues to grow throughout the 1990s, and by the early 2000s, the master was surrounded by what was essentially a group of slaves. He had one little group of people with massage training. He called those cult followers body workers, and they lived in an apartment next door to the master, so they were available 24/7 to give him a massage whenever he felt like it. One group of these body workers even sacrificed their own living room in the apartment and turned it into a dance studio so the master could practice dancing whenever he wanted. These followers were on call for the master at all times. They cooked his meals, they cleaned his house, they did his laundry. They did whatever he required in order to be happy and comfortable. Haime Michel Andreas, the teacher of the master's days, consisted of waking up whenever he wanted to, and then meditating, which a lot of followers would later say meant watching TV for a few hours. Then the cult members would make him breakfast. He would have his first massage of the day. Then he would stroll through the gardens on the grounds of the theater, the grounds that are, of course, all maintained by his followers. Then he would go into his session time with his followers. These were the hypnotherapy sessions that he was charging now $100 an hour for therapy. Then he would have a second massage around 5 p.m. and then an organic dinner prepared and paid for by his followers. Where do I sign up? How do I get me one of these cult gigs outside of the giving therapy part? I want 2 massages a day and fresh organic meals prepared for me. I want to go on a walk in a beautiful garden. I want to watch TV for 2 hours every morning. Hell, let's be honest. If I started a cult, we'd all just be sitting around watching horror movies, eating snacks, and talking about music. I would suck at culting. So there's a man in the cult named Will, and he becomes a big part of what happens later on. He's a filmmaker by trade, and he starts taking pictures of the master. The master loves posing for these photos, and then Will discovers Photoshop and gets into what he would later call his Photoshop phase, and he starts turning out these very edited images of the master, Haime Michel Andreas Gomez, the teacher of the master. He loved it. He was super into these edited images. He loved posing for the photos and having them edited to make him look more beautiful. But the raw images, the before images, the master wasn't so fond of the way he was looking in those because he was starting to age and he just couldn't have that. So he started going to a plastic surgeon and getting injections. Then he decided he wanted cheek implants, but he wasn't sure how they were going to look, and he wanted to know how painful they were and how it was going to heal. So he sends one of his male followers into the plastic surgeon to get cheek implants. Michael wanted to see what would happen after the surgery to decide if he wanted to get cheek implants himself. So not only is he having sex with the male members, the young male members in this cult, They are basically his slaves. They're cooking his meals, cleaning his house, giving him massages, and now they're going and getting plastic surgery so he can decide if he wants it himself. It's really, really easy to make light of these situations and laugh at people who put themselves in these situations. But the truth of the matter is, it's really fucked up. The truth of the matter is, it takes people really a long time to get this twisted and this messed up. And they're messed up to begin with and have a lot of trauma to begin with, which is why they're so malleable for someone like this. And although I sit here and make fun of the cult, I always do have sympathy and empathy for the people that are in the cult because they end up getting hurt, which is why I talk about this shit. So the master comes up with a con and calls it the knowing. He tells his followers that the knowing is this enlightenment doorway, and only people who are ready to receive the knowing would be eligible to get the knowing. So again, this is Cult 101. In cults, there are always certain privileges set aside for only some members who are willing to do what other members are not. All cults have some type of ritual or blessing or endowment that is not available to all of the members. That is one of the hallmarks of a cult. You must achieve the highest level in the cult in order to be eligible for that highest of high benefits. So he comes up with the knowing, and people will describe it later on as being similar to an acid trip. There were said to be sounds and bright lights and a shift in thinking and a realization of self and self-actuation. Now, we see right through this. This is nothing more than an attempt to keep followers being strung along. If Jaime Michel Andrea's teacher master felt like he was losing someone, losing a slave, then he would tell them, the knowing is very close for you. It's very, very close. He would lead them on and get them excited to receive the knowing, and that would keep them in the cult for longer. There were some instances where people got the knowing, and this is what would happen. The master would actually grab people by the head and press his thumbs into their eyes. Now, you know, when you rub your eyes really hard, you see spots and colors and lights, even with your eyes closed. And that's what was happening. People who got the knowing report that it was extremely painful. Well, yeah, Chad, because some dude in a scrot tote is digging his fingers into your eyeballs, into your eye sockets until your eyeballs touch your brain. And later on, it even came out that members that were watching someone get the knowing reported that the master had a little flashlight in his hands. And while he was digging into their eyeballs, he was flashing the light and turning it off and on. So they would get these lights and these, visions while he was doing this. I'm just picturing this, and I know for 100% sure I would get booted on the first day in this cult because I would get the church giggles so fast watching this crap. I have a really hard time with anyone who takes themselves too seriously. I'm a person that used to have a really bad temper. I don't have a temper that much anymore. I still get mad from time to time. I mean, I think that's normal. But when I'm not angry, I am pretty cynical and I get bored really easily. And people that take themselves really seriously are funny to me. I know that sounds condescending, and I don't mean it to. I really honestly don't mean it to. I just laugh at people that are very, I don't know. There's something about it that makes me giggle. I just know I could never be around this guy because he is someone who takes himself very seriously. And I can't. So all of this goes on for over a decade. And the master is living his best life with his little group of slaves doing his bidding. But behind the scenes, as is always the case with cults, there's a whole lot of abuse, fraud, tax evasion. And it was all about to catch up with Master Budgie Smuggler. A former follower of Buddhafield named Reyji comes forward with a shocking story to tell. Reyji was a high-ranking member in the Buddhafield cult, and he had seen some things that his conscience wouldn't allow him to turn away from. Reyji pens an email to the followers of the cult, and he exposes what the master has been doing. Reyji tells the cult followers that the master is a predator, a sexual abuser, a slave master, a phony, a con man, a fraudster. And this email is seen by everyone who believes in this guy. And the evidence that this follower puts in the email is very damning, and people begin to leave the cult. Jaime Michel, Andrea's teacher master, knew he was in trouble. In these healing sessions where the master would have sex with his followers, he would tell them if they didn't want to have sex with them, maybe he wasn't feeling their devotion anymore. If any of the followers told the master that they did not want to have sex, he would say things like, well, it looks like you've outgrown me and it's time for you to move on. And then, of course, these followers had to face losing their community, their home, and their friends. And so they would stay because it was like being threatened with excommunication. A lot of these people had built their lives around this cult and they had nowhere else to go. This is why these groups are so dangerous and so harmful. The whistleblower was talking about this manipulation and much, much more, and the master began to feel he was losing control. He knew he was losing control. So let's talk a little bit more about this filmmaker that was a follower in the cult. His name was Will Allen. He was a devotee of the master. And with his film knowledge, he had been documenting every move this cult leader made and many of the rituals within the cult. And when I say documenting, I mean, this guy must have had a camera in his hand 24/7. There is so much footage over the decades of this cult. It's crazy. The master, of course, has a huge ego, and he loved living his entire life with a camera in his face. So he never took issue with Will filming. But as you and I know, people who love to feed their egos often regret having their actions recorded later on. It's very obvious to everyone involved that the master had been having sex with young male members of the cult for years. And part of this was during the AIDS epidemic. The master always wanted young men who were virgins, so he would be the only one having sex with them. That way, he didn't have to use protection, which is a completely... That doesn't work, because if he's having sex with multiple people, you can still transmit the virus. It is just so backwards and so frustrating to have people fall under these false narratives. The master also claimed that using condoms was against his Catholic faith, but gay sex wasn't. Oh, but also the other members of the group were not allowed to have sex at all, because of course they weren't. The master told them that fornicating was an inferior high and they needed to save their energy for meditation and enlightenment. The whistleblower went so far as to explain how the master would give instructions to the followers to tell people outside of the group that they were like, okay, they would have an outing where they would go to watch a film at a theater, and they were instructed to tell people they were a group of film enthusiasts. If they were hiking together, they were supposed to tell other people they came in contact with that they were a hiking club. Anything to avoid being called what they really were, a cult. Now, I'm also going to tell you that I read accounts from cult members, ex-cult members, that said there were genuinely some good times inside the cult. Some of these members claimed the master is very funny and that he has a good sense of humor and that he liked to laugh a lot and that they did have genuine affection for each other as a group. They lived together, they cooked together, they did yoga and meditation together, and they would attend these self-help seminars together. Yep. I'm once again, I'm going to take the pasture with the cows, because that sounds like the absolute seventh circle of hell to me. Living with a bunch of other spiritual kooks and living my life doing yoga all day and meditating and going to self-help seminars. The pasture with the cows. Just drive by once a day and throw a bag of McDonald's out your car window. Give me a case of Diet Coke once a month. I'll survive. I'll be fine. I would prefer that to this. The members of the cult were usually working as servers in restaurants and busboys and things like that. That's how they made a little bit of money. They worked at a nearby Indian restaurant in Austin that tended to hire really good-looking people. And the cult members would go in for job interviews wearing Sikh turbans to manipulate, the owners into hiring them. I'm sure that helped. But all of these good times had faded away. And now with this whistleblower coming forward and kind of opening the eyes of people who had been with the master, some of them for 18, 20, 22 years, it was all falling apart. The cult was now a fixture in South Austin. It was up to about 120 members who had devoted their lives to Jaime Michel Andreas Gomez, master teacher, butcher, baker, candlestick maker, but he was losing his grip on this group fast. So he did what many good con artists do when they're exposed. He ran away and reinvented himself. The master takes a handful of his most ardent supporters and they move to Hawaii. He then changed his name for the, what are we up to now, 5, 6, Reyji. He starts going by Reyji, which means God King. He can't just be God. He can't just be king. He's got to be King God, God King. This shit is endlessly hilarious to me. He and his little group start living near Lanikai Beach on Oahu. This is a particularly beautiful beach with very white sands and very blue waters. It's not as crowded as a lot of beaches in Hawaii. So Reyji now and his little group are often seen on the beach practicing yoga. Here you see some of his followers literally bowing at his feet on the beach. I hate to pile on people who are obviously so lost, but damn. How do you get so broken that you're willing to give all your money to someone who is working you as a slave and you're literally bowing at their feet? I am genuinely thankful that I cannot wrap my head around that. I am very grateful for that fact. And I do have empathy for these people. The master, Reyji, Haime, somehow makes all of his tax problems go away. I'm sure his followers helped pay those debts. And for a few years, the cult lives in relative obscurity. But then the documentary comes out. Will Allen, the filmmaker, who had been Jaime Michelle Andreas Buttercup Pinkett Smith's former right-hand man, joins forces with Jared Leto somehow. And together they decide they're going to produce a documentary about this cult using all of the footage that Will has been taking for 2 decades. The documentary is released in 2016 and it's called Holy Hell. You probably remember when it came out. It made a huge splash on Netflix. I'd love to show you parts of it, but it's copyrighted. It is still on Netflix if you want to watch it. It comes out in the film that many of the members of Buddhafield cult were unaware that Jaime Andreas was having sex with some of the members of the cult. The women were especially surprised to hear this. These women were very devout. In fact, one of them says, I remember being so disgusted that one day we went to lunch and one of the women in the cult got Parmesan cheese on her salad, and I was disgusted about that. Holy hell is right. A world without Parmesan cheese? They weren't allowed to have dairy or gluten or chocolate or alcohol or anything that makes life enjoyable. Well, alcohol can be enjoyable or not, but it's just like all the other cults that we've studied. It's all about being performative. It's all about who is the most devout, who can go the longest without, who can be, the most self-flagellating, who can be the biggest martyr. It's a competition. Anytime you're in a tribal setting, there is competition. There are interviews in this documentary with former cult members that are just mind-blowing. There's lots and lots of footage of the cult building the theater, the sets for the ballet that never gets produced. In the documentary, it becomes very obvious that Jaime Michelle Andreas Gomez, Claude Van Damme, has had facial surgery. He starts looking very puffy and kind of overfilled, and he's only seen in public with his personal chef and a couple of very devout followers. He starts to get very, very isolated and introverted. The documentary also reveals some very disturbing information about the master's attitudes towards sex and especially about getting tested for HIV. He himself would never get tested, and that's why he was so stringent about only having sex with devoted young men. That made him feel safe, even though we know he was not. And we all know you're never truly safe unless you're completely convinced you're in a monogamous relationship. I mean, even then, we've seen horror stories. Not only is this story the center of Holy Hell, it's also featured in another documentary series called How to Become a Cult Leader. I believe that is also on Netflix. It features people like Jim Jones and Marshall Applewhite, and it also features Jaime Andreas Michelle Gomez Zeta Jones. I cannot. Now, the master, Reyji, supposedly hates the documentary Holy Hell. He said of it, "It is heartbreaking to see how history has been rewritten. Holy Hell is not a documentary. Rather, it is a work of fiction designed to create drama, fear, and persecution, knowing that is what sells. I am saddened by this attempt to obscure the message of universal love and spiritual awakening. It is devastating to see these friends who are once so filled with love for the world become so angry. I wish them only the best and hold each one of them in my heart. If any of my actions were a catalyst for their disharmony, I am truly sorry. May all beings find peace." Oh, I'm gonna try real hard to hold it together here. That is a lesson in gaslighting. Very often, when people who have mistreated you, have twisted the narrative about your relationship, and have done terrible things to you, are confronted about the abuse they have inflicted on you, they hop on a high horse and they claim the moral high ground, gaslighting you and trying to make you out to be the bad guy. This is a very insidious tactic. If they can come off as holier than thou, "I wish you the best. Moving forward, I am so sorry that you've chosen to be so angry," that makes them feel superior. And it will actually fool other people into believing they are actually the calm one, and you are not, because you are angry. It is devastating. There is such a thing in this world as righteous anger, and some of us who do have tempers are clinging to our anger at harder times in our lives. We should all work on lessening the anger in our life, but I am sick and tired of people talking about anger as though it's always a bad thing. And when you're angry and you're hurt, the angrier and more hurt you get as you are more gaslit, then you give people more reason to say, "Stop acting, so crazy." And if you try to turn to the other person and say, "Stop acting so calm when you've made me crazy," you look even crazier. It's evil. It's evil. It was difficult for me to dig up much information on the current status of the group, but from everything I could find, they are still existing in Hawaii. The one good thing about this cult is that Haime Gomez, Michelle, Andreas, Newton, John doesn't like kids, so he wouldn't let any of his followers have kids. So at least no children are being harmed by this cult, but adults have been and continue to be. I want to send love from our community to the former members of this cult. We all hope you're doing much better and healing in the best way you know how. And to the current followers of the Master, a little reminder. It's 2024 and you have all the resources at your fingertips to research what you're involved in. I am genuinely hoping you take the steps necessary to free yourselves from this dangerous narcissist. Thank you for joining me today on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Please hit the like button and the subscribe button if you haven't. It helps so much with the algorithm. You know I need all the help I can get. I've got 2 podcasts. This one's called Dining with Death. This one's called Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. This is the current podcast. I post new episodes every Monday and Wednesday, and there will be some podcast exclusives there that you can't hear here on YouTube. Both podcasts are on Apple, Spotify, and Amazon. I'm on Facebook and TikTok and Instagram. I'm everywhere. You can also join my Patreon. Some of you very generously give a few dollars a month to help me keep the episodes coming. And our community is also involved in a perpetual fundraiser. There is a video on my channel simply entitled Fundraiser. You can watch that short little video and it will tell you everything our community is doing to raise money to donate to police departments that have cold case DNA in storage that has never been tested. I hope you're doing well. You guys know I appreciate your support so much. I wouldn't still be here doing this if it wasn't for you. I think about you and I want you to be happy. Take care, stay safe, and be kind to each other. And I will see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Bye.